Is the White House concerned that Major League Baseball is moving their All-Star game to Colorado, where voting regulations are very similar to Georgia?
Well, let me just refute the first point you made. First, let me say, on Colorado, Colorado allows you to register on Election Day. Colorado has voting by mail, where they send to 100% of people in the state who are eligible applications to vote by mail. 94% of people in Colorado voted by mail in the 2020 election. And they also allow for a range of materials to provide, even if they vote on Election Day, for the limited number of people who vote on Election Day. I think it's important to remember the context here. The Georgia legislation is built on a lie. There was no widespread fraud in the 2020 election. Georgia's top Republican election officials have acknowledged that repeatedly in interviews. And what there was, however, was record-setting turnout, especially by voters of color. So instead, what we're seeing here is for politicians who didn't like the outcome, they're not changing their policies to win more votes. They're changing the rules to exclude more voters. And we certainly see the circumstances as different. But ultimately, sorry, let me add one more thing. It's up to Major League Baseball to determine where they're holding their All-Star game.
Okay. At the outset, you should probably already know that there is no way that there will be a state that will have a chance to stand closer to the voting regulations that are in place in Georgia right now. Maybe Arizona will find a way to get closer, but other than that, even Texas will find it a bit difficult to match the high standards set by Georgia. But Ducey still went with that line to compare Georgia and Colorado, as if no one can read things. This wasn't even a gotcha question. I really think Ducey was underprepared and Jen Psaki was overprepared. She had it all jotted down already. She knew most of the stuff, but there were also pointers she had written on her handbook. Imagine this for a moment. Ducey knows what he is going to ask, and there is no way for Jen to know. And despite that, the Fox News reporter had no idea that Colorado is pretty much a vote by mail state, that all registered voters get their ballots by mail, and more than 90%, more than 9 out of 10 vote by mail in Colorado. And yet, Ducey thought it will be a great idea to compare Colorado voting laws with Georgia. I will tell you why he did the rookie mistake. Because right-wing Twitter accounts were pushing this narrative over the last couple of days. So there is an extremely good chance that the Fox reporter saw some of those tweets, forgot to check the reasoning, and went with it and got his question slammed shut on his face. Now let us get to the voter ID part of the equation. Colorado does ask for an ID, but they accept multiple types. And here is the most important part. If in case you don't have an ID, you can still cast your vote via provisional ballot. In Georgia, you have to produce a photo ID. If you don't have an ID, you can cast a provisional ballot, but you will have to produce your ID to a county registrar within 3 days. As the Post noted, the voter ID law at issue in Georgia isn't for in-person voting, it is for mail-in voting. Georgia is going to require a driver's license number, social security number, or other ID on absentee ballots, provisions that some allege may disenfranchise black voters. Colorado sometimes requires ID to vote by mail, but only when someone casts a mail ballot for the first time. And again, the list of acceptable IDs is significantly broader. I still cannot believe Ducey went for Colorado, the state with one of the highest turnouts in the entire country. First is Minnesota, and the second is Colorado. There is no way a state with restrictive voting requirements can ever make it to the top. Even a rookie analyst should know that. But sadly, the Fox News reporter did not. You can tweet, cherry-pick data, and escape scrutiny on Twitter. But to do that at a White House briefing while the entire world is watching you live is one for the history books.